Testing. Test, 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 everybody. Can you take your seats, please? Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming from near and afar. On behalf of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, better known as the NCRI, I want to welcome you to this critical U.S. Senate forum on how the United States can and indeed must support the Iranian people's path to a free, non-nuclear Iran. And you may ask also, who am I? My name is Mark Ginsburg. I have the honor to be your moderator today. I started my career in the Senate at the age of 21 on the staff of Senator Ted Kennedy. And I have made my career in this city, but one of the greatest aspects and greatest satisfactions that I have is my unyielding commitment for decades to a free, democratic Iran, which has less to do with my professional career in government, but rather has been motivated by the personal losses that my family has endured due to Iran's terror, and the losses that so many of you, your family, your friends, those of you who have traveled from around the country from afar, I know that all of you, as I am concerned about my family in Israel, are deeply concerned about your families, Iran, and around the Gulf. They have been subjected to fear, to terror, to oppression, and it's our job to try to save them. Because the theo-fascists who maim and massacre their own people in the name of this mullah theocracy, and who have a bloodlust for Israelis, for Sunni Arabs, and for America's Jewish community, must be brought to justice. And they have not been brought to justice yet. And so I want to also give my thanks on behalf of the NCRI to all of the Senate and House staffers who are joining us today from their busy schedules. Your support, your counsel, your guidance, your advice, your boss's support means a great deal to all of us, particularly to the people of Iran who know that your bosses and you stand up proud and with courage. During the next 90 minutes, my friends, our audience will hear from a distinguished panel of experts and senators who will express their views on what we collectively can do to bring about freedom and justice to Iran. We're also going to hear a video from Madam Maryam Rajavi, the leader of the NCRI. I know Madam Rajavi personally. I am proud to be associated with the NCRI. She is a woman of courage and conviction. She has sacrificed her life, and she has brought together the greatest coalition of Democrats abroad and in Iran to oppose this regime. It is not by accident that she and those members of the NCRI have been targeted for assassination and terror repeatedly by this tyrannical regime. In her capacity as one of the most respected leaders of Iran's domestic and international democratic movement, at times I'm troubled when I hear about the fact that she doesn't receive as much publicity as the pretender to the throne, Reza Pahlavi. Let me make it very clear for those of us who spend a great deal of time talking to our friends in Iran when there's no war, when there is war, and when there is a chance for their lives to be put on the line. They are not interested in a monarchy. They are not interested in a pretender to the throne who has sat in Los Angeles, sunning himself while the people in Iran and the diaspora of Iranian opposition have sacrificed so much. It's not that I have anything personal against a man who also is interested in seeing Iran be free. But what I am most interested in is making sure that you get to know Maryam Rajavi. Now, one of my responsibilities here is to know when to shut up. And the reason why I'm going to stop right now is because I have the honor of introducing Senator Tom Tillis. Our speakers may be interrupted by senators who have a schedule that must be accommodated, and I'll return to the podium. So let me just say a few words about Senator Tillis. He's a member of the Senate Committee on the Judiciary and a co-chair of the Bipartisan Senate Human Rights Caucus. He's also the sponsor of the Senate Resolution 599 protecting the Iranian political refugees, including female former political prisoners and Ashraf in Albania. Senator Tillis, unfortunately, is retiring. And as someone who has had the pleasure and honor to meet him many times, I must say that Senator Tillis is going to be missed. I know that he's a champion of freedom for Iran, and I know that you'll be grateful for his remarks. Senator?
Well, thanks, everybody, and welcome. It was a short commute. My office is literally right across the hallway here. And unfortunately, as last week, as some of you were going around asking Senate members to come and visit, I ran into some folks. I was about to go to a funeral. Actually, it was earlier this week. And they said, I hope you'll come. And I said, certainly. I've come every time that you're here. We were just talking about how I've come to greet you many times. This is not one that I'm going to be able to enjoy the delicious food, though. I've got 3 lunches that I've got to go to today, so there's only one I'm going to be able to eat at. But as you know, I've spoken with you several times, and I've always said that someday I hope we're doing this in Tehran. And maybe we're almost there. Maybe this is the opportunity. I reached out to President Trump over the weekend and told him that I appreciate the fact that he's done something that no other president has had the courage to do. It's not without its risk, and it's certainly, we have a long way to go. But I believe that President Trump has finally taken the step that could force real, meaningful, and lasting change. And that may lay the groundwork for a new kind of Iran, an Iran that unleashes the incredible potential of its 92 million people, an Iran that has one of the richest histories of any nation in the Middle East, an Iran that I firmly believe that the vast majority simply want to live in peace with a family of nations that want to do the same. I believe that it actually represents an opportunity to fix a number of the things that ail the Middle East. But there's a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of prayer to be had. And there's a lot of patience that will be necessary because I know our president likes things to get done like that. But things in the Middle East that are lasting and meaningful or enduring do not happen like that. So the Congress needs to stand by the president, but we also have a very important role to play so that this is not just something that sort of becomes a priority and then moves on. No, this is a time for members of Congress to say it's important to deal with the threat of nuclear weapons that the mullahs represent. But it's equally important to make sure that we put Iran on a path to freedom, and one where they recognize the family of democratic nations are the nations they should look to. Not China, not Russia, not North Korea, but the nations that have proven that democracy, free speech, freedom of religion work. And it's the only system that sustains itself over time. Take, for example, our 250-year history. So as we move forward with the uncertain times in Iran, I think they're very necessary. They're frightening. And it's not lost on me some of the suffering of the innocent people in Iran. They're the ones that we should pray for. But we also need to make sure that Congress plays a role in making sure that whatever agreement comes out of these discussions, that it be an agreement that's ratified by Congress so that it transcends administrations and it transcends Congresses. Now, I'm only here for 262 more days, and I don't say that because I'm counting the days until I'm gone. I say that because I'm counting the number of days that I still have to make an impact. And I do believe in those 262 days, we will make an impact for you all and your loved ones in Iran. God bless you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm going to continue with my remarks, and then we're going to move through our program. You know, today, it's 7 weeks since the conflict began, and the people of Iran are at a historic crossroads. And the question that we in the United States have is, will the people of Iran be provided the support they need to seize this historic moment to overthrow the tyranny of the mullahs, or will they be compelled to endure another sad chapter of oppression and suffering? The situation on the ground in Iran demonstrates an irrefutable reality. The external military pressure alone will not trigger a collapse of this Iranian regime. Instead, developments inside Iran point to a different possibility, one driven by the people of Iran and the organized resistance movement and the political leadership both inside and outside Iran that lead that political movement, who are capable of challenging the regime domestically. Ladies and gentlemen, the numbers, the tens of thousands of people who lost their lives in January is a testament to the courage of young people and old people in Iran who didn't have the guns to resist the dreaded besiege, but took to the streets and were mowed down as sacrificial lambs for this regime. Who can blame them for not taking to the streets again right now without knowing that there's a path forward that would provide them the support that they need, that could be provided while we all are so focused on the Straits of Hormuz? In just a matter of days, this ceasefire is supposed to end. Then what? We're sitting here as if we're in a halftime period between conflict and what could constitute peace. But there could never be peace if this regime survives. There will never be peace in Iran. There will never be peace in the Straits of Hormuz. There will never be peace in the Persian Gulf or within the Gulf community. Certainly there will never be peace in Israel. And there will not be peace in the United States until this regime is totally destroyed. The Iranian people expect nothing less. They've been encouraged, coaxed to rise up, but they can't do it alone. Even though the Iranian regime is weaker than at any recent time in decades, it has become simultaneously as repressive as ever. The combination of internal dissent, the organized resistance movements that have been formed and quietly sprung into action by the NCRI, and the loss of regional leverage created by a volatile series of events that they themselves instigated now compels the United States to recalibrate to align with these realities. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share with you a hope that the United States, which has done so much during the last many weeks to set the stage for what could be a change in the chapter of Iran's future, we must do more. And what we can do, I'll talk about as we wrap up. I have my own views as to what is necessary for us to do and what the United States and other countries concerned should do. I want to close this particular opening by saying a word about Maryam Rajavi, who is going to give you a video message shortly. She's welcomed the ceasefire as a step towards protecting civilians and lasting peace. She's also emphasized peace and freedom are an inseparable component of Iran's future. And she's called for an immediate halt to executions and recognition of the Iranian people's right to overthrow this regime. Her 10-point program, which she introduced before a session of the Council of Europe in December 2006, encapsulates the aspirations of the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance for the future of Iran. Now, I don't expect you to read that 10-point program right here. It's on the NCRI website. But it's a demonstration of something that had been locked in concrete since 2006, before many an uprising has occurred. Her leadership has coalesced the largest global opposition. I wish one day you could join the NCRI at its global leadership meeting, where hundreds of thousands, I'm kidding you not, squeeze into a convention center outside Paris with parliamentary leaders, foreign dignitaries, and Iranian diaspora to honor the leadership of the NCRI, as well as the domestic opposition forces led by its internal compatriots of the MEK. Her call for a pluralistic republic based on separation in religion, state gender equality, and the abolition of the death penalty, peace, coexistence, and a non-nuclear Iran could be written right here in Pennsylvania in 1776. Okay? As we mark our 250th celebration of our Declaration of Independence, I hope that you'll be inspired by the speakers today and think about what a Declaration of Independence in 2026 would mean for the Iranian people. And so I have the pleasure now to, please, behind me, you'll see a video message from Maryam Rajavi.
Distinguished senators, Senator Blunt, Ambassador Brownback, Ambassador Sands, Ambassador Ginsberg, ladies and gentlemen. In these critical circumstances, I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with you. I sincerely appreciate your attention to the struggle of the Iranian people for peace and freedom. Today, more than ever, a fundamental question is before us. What is the real solution to Iran's crisis? Over the past 47 years, nearly every approach has been tested. These have included policies of appeasement, Europe's so-called critical dialogue, negotiations, and even war. Yet all have failed because the regime would lose its power if it were to accept any reform. The regime is weaker than ever before, but its nature remains unchanged. It will neither revise its policy of repression nor abandon its efforts to obtain a nuclear weapon, support terrorist proxies, and interfere in the affairs of the countries in the region. Since March 19, at least 13 political executions have taken place in Iran, including 6 MEK members and 7 defiant protesters. They were all accused of working to overthrow the regime. Through these executions, the regime is intensifying an atmosphere of terror in an effort to prevent another uprising. Despite decades of repression, there is a determined, selfless, and organized resistance inside Iran. This movement is prepared to pay the highest price for freedom and has risen through multiple massacres. This is a book with name of 20,000 of these martyrs. This movement has 4 decades of experience confronting the Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. It's a strategy based on organized resistance against the IRGC and relying on popular uprisings has attracted the highest level of support among Iran's youth over the past year. I must emphasize that the people of Iran do not want to return to the dictatorship of the Shah. We believe the ceasefire was the most appropriate decision at a highly sensitive moment by the United States. We hope this step will lead to an end to the war and open a path toward peace and freedom. However, real and lasting peace can only be achieved through the overthrow of the ruling religious dictatorship by the people of Iran and their organized resistance. In recent days, Khamenei's son claimed that more than 17 million people are ready to sacrifice their lives for the regime. If this claim is true, he should accept a free election under United Nations supervision and based on the principle of popular sovereignty, not clerical rule. However, the ruling theocracy does not have the courage to accept such a test. Honorable Senators, this is a critical moment, not only in our history, but also in the history of the Middle East and the world. It is also a moment to take responsibility and adopt the right policy. Over the years, the most important missing element in Western policy has been a failure to recognize the role of the Iranian people and their organized resistance in bringing about change. While their focus has been on engagement with the regime or on containing it, the Iranian people and resistance have been overlooked. I urge lawmakers to focus their attention on supporting the Iranian people and the organized resistance inside the country, including the resistance units that stand on the front lines of the struggle for freedom. On the political ground, the National Council of Resistance of Iran offers a credible framework for a peaceful transition by holding a free election within 6 months after the fall of the regime. And then it will hand over the power to the elected representatives of the people. At the heart of this vision is its 10-point plan. It outlines a future for Iran based on free elections, gender equality, with participation of women in political leadership, the separation of religion and state, recognition of the rights of oppressed ethnic groups, a non-nuclear. This is a plan for stability, democracy, and peace. The solution to the crisis in Iran lies in its people, in their courage, and in their organized resistance. To recognize the Iranian people's resistance and stand on the right side of history. I call on all of you to support the Iranian people and think about regime.
I'm old enough to remember that Margaret Thatcher was called the Iron Lady. I believe that Maryam Rajavi deserves to also be called the future Iron Lady of Iran. And I say that because, again, it's so hard to know what is going on inside the country when there's a total internet blackout. It is so difficult to appreciate the repression that is taking place. Every last ounce of the mullah's blood and treasure is being spent to keep the people in their homes and to shoot them in the streets if they dare come out. Her call for help is a call that needs to be heeded. And a call for help is represented by the pictures that you see behind me. And let me say a word before we move on, and I have the honor of introducing Senator Blunt. You know, this escalating repression that's occurring that we're hearing about in little bits and pieces paints an awful picture of how many young people are dying in prisons and on the streets while the bombing and the repression goes on. There's been at least 14 executions of political prisoners in recent weeks. Now, you may think 14 is not a lot. That's just the 14 that we actually have heard about outside. All were directly members of the NCRI's domestic democracy movement. Do not underestimate the attractiveness and courage of people who rallied to NCRI's flag inside Iran and who are now facing the type of tyranny that the regime is inflicting on anyone who dares oppose them. 3 of these bright young people, a second generation of MEK supporters and NCRI supporters in their early 30s, who all confirmed their commitment to the organization in taped messages from prison before their execution. You know the drill. Your life will be spared if you sign a confession. And they refused to do so. They were 30 years old. They were not 80 years old. They were Babak Alipur, a law graduate, Puya Gobadi, an electrical engineer, Vahid Amerian, an electrical engineer, Abkar Danashevekar, an engineer, and Abul Hassan Montazer, an architect. And additionally, 7 other young protesters who were arrested during the January 26 uprising were executed because they refused to denounce their charge of confronting the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps. And let me also call their names. Saleh Mohammadi, a 19-year-old wrestler. You may have heard about him. Saeed Dawoodi, 21 years old. Amir Hossein Hatami, 18 years old. Mehdi Ghashami, Mohammed Amin Bulgari, Shaheen Vadis Parat, and Ali Fahim, all had not even turned 20. And they sacrificed their lives in the name of freedom. Think about it. They're not merely numbers, okay? They're not statistics. They were lives. They were the future of Iran. They were the embodiment of the nation's hope, and their execution, carried out even as the war cast its shadow across the country, reveals, ladies and gentlemen, a profound truth, that this regime fears its own people more than it fears an external enemy. May I just ask, before I show you a video honoring these people, that you bow your heads for a second in silence to honor their memory. May it be a blessing. Thank you. And now you'll see a short video about their sacrifice.
The Iranian regime has rapidly accelerated its campaign of state-sanctioned terror, executing 2 more political prisoners and members of the PMOI, Vahid Bani Amerian and Abul Hassan Montazer. These killings come in the immediate aftermath of the execution of 4 other PMOI members earlier this week. In a desperate attempt to justify these state murders, the regime's media branded the victims as terrorists guilty of armed rebellion. In reality, they were dedicated freedom fighters. Abul Hassan Montazer was a 66-year-old architect and former political prisoner from the 1980s, while 33-year-old Vahid Bani Amerian held a master's degree and had already spent years behind bars simply for seeking a free Iran. Their executions were the culmination of a grossly flawed judicial process. Following their arrests in January 2024, both men endured months of severe physical and psychological torture in Evin Prison's notorious Ward 209. Their death sentences were handed down by the infamous criminal judge Iman Afshari in sham hearings that lasted only a few minutes each. The regime's cruelty was further amplified by a violent anti-riot raid on Gezel Hazar prison the night before the killings began, where inmates were brutally beaten and held completely incommunicado. These atrocities, carried out despite fierce warnings from Amnesty International and global lawmakers, highlight a broader campaign of repression under Masoud Pezeshkian's presidency, during which executions have reached unprecedented levels. The timing exposes a profoundly vulnerable regime paralyzed by the fear of being overthrown. Reeling from massive nationwide uprisings in late 2025 and the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in February 2026, the clerics are exploiting the fog of war to quietly eliminate their most capable adversaries and terrorize a restless society. This unabated bloodthirst poses a horrifyingly real threat to other PMOI supporters who currently languish on death row, facing the exact same fabricated charges. By isolating prisoners and carrying out rapid secret hangings, the regime's behavior chillingly mirrors the buildup to the 1988 massacre of political prisoners. Statements of concern are no longer enough. The international community must take immediate, concrete actions to hold the perpetrators accountable and stop this killing machine before another mass slaughter unfolds.
Ladies and gentlemen, think about the fact that in January, tens of thousands of people were killed in the streets of Iran, and we don't know their names. And even if we did, we wouldn't have time today to enumerate them. We have a distinguished group of speakers here, and I have the pleasure of introducing Senator Roy Blunt. Senator Blunt started his career in the House of Representatives and had a distinguished career in the U.S. Senate. But most importantly, ever since he arrived in the House, he put himself on the line in the name of freedom for Iran and Iran's people. When the Iranian people were forced into exile, the NCRI and MEK, into Iraq, literally put into concentration camps, he was there to support them and demand that they be free. And when they were moved to Albania, to Camp Ashraf, he became one of the Congress's greatest voices to protect their rights and to protect their freedoms and to give them hope that their diaspora and days in exile will soon end. Senator, you've been an inspiration to everyone in this audience, and we're grateful for you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. It's good to be here with you and Ambassador Brownback and Ambassador Sands. Going to have more members of the Congress come, and if they don't get here today, it's not because we don't continue to have the kind of support. There are three people I want to introduce here who have worked with me, House and Senate, and now on these issues. And if you three would stand, that way if people want to talk to one of us before we get away today, that would be good. Richard Eddings, go ahead, stand up, Richard. Brian Diffel and Ali Arahushman are actively involved in trying to be sure that we create a sense of what we need to do to have a democratic government in Iran. And since it's reminded today, we had the first meeting we had that was similar to this meeting was in 2012 in this room. It was my second year in the Senate. And I was also reminded I walked in with the 8 people on the panel, which were Senator Lieberman and Patrick Kennedy and other people who were here and continue to be helpful, in Senator Lieberman's case, through his lifetime. I can't think of a year since 2012 when more has changed than from last year to this year. Many things have changed, many things remain, need to be determined. Of the things that have changed, the leadership in Iran has been decimated, been targeted, identified, eliminated in a way we wouldn't have anticipated. The weakness of a heavily surveilled society, I think, became available to the understanding of the Iranians and, frankly, other surveilled societies around the world. If you have a surveilled society and a capable adversary, that capable adversary can also use your own surveillance system to surveil you. And I'm absolutely sure that was what was happening before we did the things that we have done in Iran in the last weeks, figuring out who people were, figuring out the atrocities they'd committed, and seeing that a change was made. The biggest problem the regime faces is that sustained internal opposition that Ambassador Ginsburg did such a good job talking about. And these photos behind me today are more evidence of that. Also, when you look at the photos, while some people in the story are almost my age, most of the people are way less than my age. They're young Iranians born since 1979, some long since 1979, who no longer want to tolerate the kind of country they have been forced to grow up in. Many things remain the same. Iran's still controlled by a toxic secular regime that doesn't allow any kind of freedom. The IRCG, while weakened, still continues their repressive structure to not allow freedom in the society and be the enforcement agency for the Ayatollahs and others. The regime continues to focus on decimating any internal resistance. So those things are as they have always been. Thousands have been murdered. Mrs. Rajavi held up a book that said that had 20,000 names in it. I am confident we don't know all of the names. And so we continue to see that. The MEK in Iran continues to resist. I've been told, though the regime doesn't want to talk about this incident, that 250 MEK attacked the Khomeini headquarters. 100 of them were killed or captured, and I firmly believe the ones that were captured were likely then killed later and are not included in the names of people we understand have given their life for a future of freedom. And I thought, you know, at my age, I'd understand Senator Ambassador Ginsburg's view. These people are not 80 years old making a final stand, looking at a few years of life before them. They are people who at young ages refuse to concede the future of their country, even if it costs them their life. The United States clearly led and been part of a devastating attack on the regime, more successful than anyone would have imagined in changing those in control. The blockade, if sustained, and we do have the power to sustain that blockade longer than the Iranians have the power to withstand it, will bring the regime economically to their knees. I read in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago, the estimate is that in 2 weeks, the oil fields will have to shut down because everywhere they have to put oil will be filled up in 2 weeks. The other things that come out of the Gulf that sustain their regime will no longer be coming out of the Gulf. I think the message here is don't quit too soon. Don't quit until we've achieved the goals that at this moment are achievable. You know, the weakness of our position would be in a democratic society, what is often your weakness, looking for somebody you can negotiate with. There are no moderates to be found in the regime. We're always looking for moderates in the regime. We have never found them yet. And in fact, in the Washington Post today, there was an article that talked about the fact that the regime has once again found its best and most beloved negotiating position, which is we are about to reach an agreement. They can sustain we are about to reach an agreement forever if we allow it to be sustained forever, and we should not allow that. For administration after administration, decade after decade, we've been looking for Iranians that always give the idea that, well, we're about to come to a conclusion. They publicly announced we agreed on many things. We never seem to have agreed on many things, and they never agree on the things they said they agreed on. It's time we learned that lesson, and I hope we do. There should be no guarantees in any agreement with the regime that we in any way will stand by and affirm the regime. They should not be affirmed. The number one thing we should be negotiating on, in my view, would be to stop the executions now. to stop the killing of protesters now, and understand that during all this time, we have had one group in Iran that has led the consistent effort. They continue to do that. The NCRI has outlined a proposed structure of what that interim government should look like, with an emphasis on interim. A government that provides enough stability to quickly get to democratic, free, and fair elections, and a government that is committed to democracy. The 10 principles in the 2006 plan are exactly that, 10 consistent principles in a plan that has now been out there for 2 decades for people to look at, and that NCRI has been talking about for 2 decades, and Maryam Rajavi talked about again today. This is no time to lose the ground we have seen gained in Iran, and gained by the forces that have been attacking the regime externally, and the incredible individuals that have been attacking the regime internally. Hopefully, if we see the kind of changes in the next year that we've seen in the last year, a year from now, we'll be looking at an Iran that has a much different future for all its people and for all the people that care about its people. Thanks for letting me be here.
Wise words indeed from a wise senator. And most importantly, the fact that you introduced your staff as a former staffer from the Senate, I think that just shows a remarkable sense of greatness, Senator. And speaking of great people, I have the honor of introducing Ambassador Carla Sands, former U.S. Ambassador to Denmark. What does Denmark have to do with Iran? That is not the question. More importantly, what has Carla Sands not done yet for the women of Iran? Her leadership at Ashraf, her support for the women's rights movement in Iran is what distinguishes her. Now, I'm a former ambassador, and I don't mind being called ambassador, but to you, Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ginsburg. Ladies and gentlemen, senators, ambassadors, distinguished guests, Iran today stands at a historic crossroads. And when I was in Denmark, we actually had attempts at assassinations from the regime in Copenhagen. So it's a worldwide scourge, this regime. But for more than 4 decades, the international community has searched for a response to the crisis created by this ruling theocracy. 2 approaches have dominated: appeasement and war. We've tried both paths, appeasement and war, and now it's time to face reality. Engagement and concessions do not moderate the regime. They embolden it, enabling greater repression at home and aggression abroad. We have military confrontation. It may be forceful, but it can't produce legitimacy. It can't build democratic institutions or create a viable political alternative. It may weaken the regime, and it has, but it can't replace it with freedom. And this is no longer theoretical. Events on the ground have made one fact unmistakably clear. The Iranian crisis cannot be solved from outside. It must be resolved from within. This is not an abstract conclusion, it's a strategic fact. And make no mistake, the Iranian regime is much weaker now than it has ever been, but more repressive against its own people because it fears its own population more than any foreign bombs. More than 2 decades ago, the NCRI President-elect, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, articulated what remains the only viable path forward, a third option. Neither appeasement nor war, but democratic change led by the Iranian people and their organized resistance. And I'll continue in a few minutes. We have an esteemed senator who has joined us.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but that was the deal that we do. Senator Cory Booker just came in, and I am proud to say that this is the third time that I had the honor of introducing him. And just the last time I introduced him, he had just gotten married. So how's it going, Senator? 4 months in, it's phenomenal. But most importantly, I'm honored to call him a friend. He might not know how much I do support him. I do it in many ways by going to New Jersey and looking for a place to live so I can vote for him up there. And I will continue to do whatever I can. One day, Senator, I'll have the honor of seeing you in the White House and being by your side, I hope. Okay.
Oh, so I just want to say, first of all, thank you to our previous speaker for being so generous and pausing and letting me come here amidst a busy day. I continue to see my colleague here every single time, who is a man who he may not be holding a Senate office right now, but he's one of these demonstrators that shows that leadership is not a title or a position, it's action and example, and I'm grateful for his presence here today, as always. I come with a heavy heart, and I want to say it's difficult to stand here with the faces of martyrs behind me. It's difficult because I know the sacrifice the people behind me have made for a cause that has been dear to me and my family in America for generations. Tragically, there's no great nation that is free that hasn't had martyrs willing to stand and give their best measure of devotion to their nation and to their cause. But to honor those who have died, we, the living, have to stand even stronger, more committed. To honor their sacrifice, we too must sacrifice, God willing, not with our lives, but with our unyielding, indefatigable, unconquerable commitment to a cause. And I've said this before here, when Iranian people, when Persian people stand up for freedom and for justice, it is not just about Iran. It is this affirmation of a truth that a man far greater than me spoke about when Martin Luther King said that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I want to be clear with you that this is a cause and an issue that is not partisan. It is not left or right. It is right or wrong. And the freedom of the Iranian people is vital. It is the right cause, not just for those who love Iran, who love the Persian people, who love the legacy of one of the greatest civilizations ever in humanity, but we see that how Iran is interwoven with the entire story of the Middle East, how it is woven in, as we see now, to the entire world economy. But as the speaker who preceded me so eloquently said, I felt like she's saying it all, why would I interrupt her, is that we will not achieve peace by bombing from above. History has shown us that you do not achieve regime change through unleashing some of the most devastating weapons ever created in humanity from above. What you see is tragic mistakes made, like little girls dying in a school. What you see is thousands of Persians now having died unjustly, unnecessarily in this war. I know what was going on before this war was wholly unacceptable, when people were standing up and rising up for their freedom, and this regime butchered them in the most vile imaginable ways. But the answer to violence is not more violence. And so I stand here with an urgency, watching a war go on that has achieved little to no strategic objectives that we've set. It has not led to regime change. If anything, it's empowered the IRGC and more extremists. It hasn't led to the end of their nuclear capabilities. The fissile, highly enriched fissile material is still there in that nation. It hasn't led to some unconditional surrender. If anything, the regime has found more power by choking the Straits of Hormuz and making us fall into a global economic oil shock and higher prices being felt from Asia to New Jersey. And so I want to thank this room. I have now, for years of working on this, I have deeply close friends here who are showing me grace and kindness, but more importantly, showing me what my ancestors in this country, my black ancestors and my white ancestors who stood up for freedom in America, they are showing me that same tradition as Americans in their unyielding commitment. I want to make clear before I go that the horrible stakes of endless wars and the fact that there is no military solution to ending this war, that I am going to do everything I can in the United States Senate to push us as a body to hold hearings, to debate, to discuss what's going on in Iran right now. We have not, since this war outbroke, had one open hearing to discuss and even debate the issues that we hold common ground on. There is not a senator in this body, not one of the 100 of us, that don't want to free Iran. But why aren't we having a marketplace of ideas in the world's most deliberative body? Why aren't we holding accountable any administration? Because whatever you believe about the current one, no administration is perfect. This body that you are in right now, the Senate, was formed, if you look at the Federalist Papers, Federalist Paper number 47 said the Senate was created to provide a check and a balance to an administration that may overstep its bounds. That we have a role to play in the pursuit of a more perfect union and more justice at home and abroad. And so I am going to use every procedural power I have to force us to have the deeper discussions, the more vital debates about how we bring about not just an end to the war, but how we bring about what we all want, which is a free Iranian people. And so I will end with this. I've been blessed when I came to the Senate that my colleague, never a colleague of mine, my mentor, a man named Bill Bradley from New Jersey, a senator, told me the best thing you can do is to try to have real relationships with people across the aisle. Try to honor them. You may disagree, but understand you have shared humanity and that you both love this country. I tried to do what he told me, and when I first got here, I tried to go on this odyssey of meeting with all of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I couldn't get on this one guy's schedule. And finally, I got 15 minutes, they told me, that I could sit down with this lion of the Senate. I'm a new guy, a young guy in the Senate, and he agreed to meet with for 15 minutes. I was actually nervous, that I can confess that now. He's now since passed, but I was nervous. I'm days in the Senate, and I get a chance to go meet with John McCain. And I go into his office, and I will never forget, they told me 15 minutes, but I started looking at his wall, so it looked like a museum of these extraordinary pictures from American history, and I start asking him, and he starts opening up and telling me stories until I got to the Vietnam War, which is not a great chapter. In fact, it's a time that teaches all of us that bombing a nation is not going to bring about regime change. And I'll never forget, he opened a filing cabinet and pulled out these documents, and he cradled them as if they were living and still being processed by him. And he showed me not only documents about his time as a prisoner of war, but he showed me a picture of his lifeless body being carried after his plane crashed out by Vietnamese soldiers. But the story that I want to end with is a story he told me that so moved me, I included in the book I just wrote, in a chapter about patriotism. And my argument in the chapter is patriotism is never brash and loud. It is the quiet devotion to the ideals of this country and to the people of this country. Our greatest patriots did acts of devotion that were not seen, not televised. And here's John McCain telling me this story about Mike Christensen in this POW camp that asked for scraps of paper, of cloth rather, that he brought together, different color cloth, and on the inside of a jacket, he put an American flag. And every night, he said, when they were getting ready to settle down for the night, he would hang the jacket up so the American flag was facing them, and they would put their hands on their hearts and pledge allegiance to that flag. And he said it was like this reaffirmation of faith, not just in a flag, not just in a nation, but to her ideals, to the enduring ideals of freedom and justice. One day, the Vietnamese prison guards found the flag, dragged Mike Christian out, and beat him within inches of his life. He was thrown back in, and John McCain said his face was all swollen up. He was so badly beaten. And they tended to his wounds, and they were going to bed, and he said he fell asleep, and then he woke up. And there he said he saw in the corner of the structure Mike Christensen sitting with a bamboo needle, face swollen, hands shaking, and he was again sewing together an American flag. I want you all to know that I hope in my lifetime I have opportunities to show the level of patriotism of some of the men and women I've served with in this body. I hope that I have the opportunity to show the level of patriotism that so many Americans do, those that fight our fires, that patrol our streets, that serve in our military, that teach our children. Their quiet patriotism is how we've sustained this nation. But I want you to know that when we pledge allegiance to the flag, all of us in this room as Americans, when we put our hands over the hearts, remember, we end with those words, with liberty and justice for all. It is not just an American ideal. All people deserve liberty. All people deserve justice. The people of Iran will be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker, for those great comments. I will say that every president since the terrible takeover by the Mullah regime has said that they were going to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and I'm proud that President Trump, with his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has actually taken the fight to the Mullah regime and are in process, because bombing has weakened this regime. Bombing has weakened it to the weakest it has ever been since they took power in the 1979-1980 era. And President Trump may not have set out for regime change, but he is now negotiating with a new regime, certainly. The regime, though, it's surviving through repression that cannot reform itself, censorship, executions. These beautiful young men with their future ahead of them, and these powerful men that were leading resistance for so many decades, they may have silenced them, but they don't silence us. The only conclusion that can be clear is that only the Iranian people, organized, determined, and supported by a structured, battle-tested, organized force on the ground, can actually bring a new regime. And here lies the reality. It's too often overlooked. The organized alternative does exist. And at its core, it's leading, shaping, sustaining it. And these are the women, the Iranian women. For decades, the world has focused rightly on the oppression of women in Iran. But the other half of the story is even more powerful. Iranian women are not merely victims of repression, they are leaders of change. Leading, yes, they're leading the most organized force in the history of Iran. Over the past 4 decades, they've assumed leadership at the highest levels of the largest, most organized, most enduring opposition movement of Iran, namely the MEK. And this isn't symbolic, it's structural, it's deliberate, it's transformative. They've reached a profound understanding. Their liberation is inseparable from the liberation of their nation that's held hostage by the most misogynist tyrants in the history of the world. And now they choose resistance, and they've become freedom fighters like nothing the world has ever seen before. They've endured imprisonment, torture, and execution. They've sacrificed careers, families, and personal lives, and not for abstract ideals, but to end tyranny and build a free Iran. Under Mrs. Rajavi's leadership, this movement has redefined political struggle. It shattered long-standing taboos and proved through action that women are not only equal participants, but a driving force for change. And this stands in stark contrast to both forms of dictatorship that have shaped Iran's modern history. We're told by some to look nostalgically to the monarchy, but history tells a different story. The Shah's regime was a male-dominated dictatorship sustained by repression, censorship, and the brutality of the Savak. Today, his son seeks relevance, yet he has repeatedly and publicly expressed pride in that era. In fact, just this week, Reza Pahlavi openly defended his father's crimes. He was pressed by the Swedish TV SVT on his family's role in the repression, and he said, "I'm proud of my heritage, my family's history, and everything they have done." Let's be clear. You cannot build a democratic future relying on a dark past, which was once widely rejected by the vast majority of the Iranian people. The Iranian people have overthrown a corrupt, repressive, and one-party system of the Pahlavi dynasty, and they will not go backwards. The Iranian nation is sacrificing their own lives because they're striving for freedom, not putting an unrepentant son of a deposed dictator in a palace to rule them. Across the country, Iranians are demanding fundamental change. And within this reality, the organized resistance, rooted, structured, and resilient, it continues to grow. And this isn't abstract. It's a living, battle-tested movement that has survived the most unthinkable challenges, like none in the history of Iran. When Khomeini invited the MEK to join the government in 1979, they refused and never endorsed him. And they paid a high price for it, with thousands of its members slaughtered by the IRGC and repressive forces. And when the supreme leader issued a fatwa, or religious decree, to execute all MEK members and associates unless they repented, they stood firm, as many as 30,000 of them were murdered in 1988. And when they were asked to endorse Khomeini's machine of producing regional proxies, they refused and paid a high price again. And when they were asked to endorse the constitution of the regime that would legitimize the absolute clerical rule, They refused and became targets of killings in Iran. Mrs. Rajavi held her ground, and her movement went on the offensive against the regime. They introduced a 10-point plan for the future of Iran, exposed major nuclear sites of Iran, and formed a formidable army regime. The MEK fought in the courts for 15 years and got itself removed from the list. When Tehran threatened that they would raise hell in Iraq and wanted the MEK disarmed, the group turned over 2,139 tanks, armored personnel carriers, and field guns. And they patiently adjusted their strategy and formed resistance units within Iran. And they expanded it so that in February of this year, 5 days before the U.S. and Israel war on Iran, they used 250 MEK members to launch an assault on the headquarters of the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. This movement is what the Iranian people need, and this movement is what the United States needs, and this movement is what the world needs. And Mrs. Rajavi does not seek foreign boots on the ground or imposed solutions. She calls for recognition and an end to the decades of misinformation and marginalization. The United States and the international community now have a historic opportunity. The time for ambiguity is over. The time for choosing sides is now. Recognize that change in Iran is already underway. Recognize that the viable alternative does exist. Recognize the National Council of Resistance of Iran and the provisional government of Mrs. Rajavi have put forward to guarantee that there's a transition from theocracy to a representative government. And such recognition aligns with the will of the Iranian people. So let's be clear. Iran's future will not be shaped by relics of the past. It will be determined by the Iranian people, by their courage, their sacrifice, and their organized resistance. It's a future based on democracy, equality, the rule of law, and the separation of religion and state. It's a future embodied in the vision of Mrs. Rajavi, and she has articulated this in her Jeffersonian 10-point platform for the future of Iran. A free, secular, democratic, non-nuclear republic at peace with its neighbors. So today, let's move beyond illusions, the illusion that the past offers a solution. The path forward is the Iranian people and their organized resistance. And it's time for the United States to stand clearly with them. Thank you.
I turned around to my colleague, Ali Reza, and I said, she just hit this out of the ballpark. It was a grand slam, Senator, Ambassador. Thank you. I now would love to move this thing along and introduce Ambassador Sam Brownback. He's a former governor and senator from Kansas. You prefer governor or senator? Both? Governor, senator? Senator, okay. Especially here. Let me say a word about Senator Brownback. He has been standing side by side with the NCRI and Maryam Rajavi for decades. He has devoted so much of his career to the cause of freedom and human rights in so many small and big ways, moving American support forward on behalf of the freedom of agenda for Iran. And so, Senator, we welcome you today.
Thanks, Ambassador. Appreciate that very much. It's a pleasure to be back with you. Ambassador Sands, I associate myself with your remarks. Excellent, great summation of really what we're talking about and what we're fighting about. But I want to recognize the NCRI right at the outset. You have maintained this fight for 50 years. 50 years. And I applaud you for doing that. And we are in the red zone now, in a football term. We are close to winning. We can win this. This is the time. We don't quit now. This is the time you see it on through. You push it hard. We are here. We can do this. This can happen. And so I really want to urge you to continue to really press in, particularly at this moment right now. The first time I ran for public office, I ran for Congress in Kansas. First time I came in, I tried to get around me as many kind of beautiful people as I could, mayors of communities and state legislators and this and that. When it got to a tough fight, and when I got a little controversial, they all scattered. They didn't want to hurt their reputations. And so I reconnoitered, refigured, and I recruited the people who would fight, whether they were pretty or not, but they'd fight. And we won. And we won, and we won. The NCRI is a group that'll fight. And that's what you've got to have at this point in time, is a group of people who will fight. Thank you for doing that for 50 years, and let's finish the task now. This is the time to do it. Now, the area in particular I want to hit is the theological beliefs of the people who are now in power in Iran. With what's taken place, the theological views of this Iranian regime cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon or remain in power in Iran. If they retain power, they will be a wounded bear, and they'll be more dangerous than ever. They will attack, regardless of who it is. They will attack the United States. They will attack Israel. They will attack Gulf countries as long as they are in power. They will do it any way they can. They will do it with terrorists. They'll do it with bombs. They'll do it with blackmailing the Strait of Hormuz. They will do it any way they can. That's the theological point of view of Mahdiism. That's the theological view. They believe this theological construct is that the regime must destroy its enemies and create a pure Islamic society to hasten the return of their messianic figure, Imam Mahdi. That's who they believe they are. And if they are allowed to somehow stay in power after all this bombing, they will declare victory and a martyrdom complex that will be more dangerous than even it was in the past. There will be no peace in the region while this regime is in power. That is the blunt point of where we are right now. In a Western term, we've been riding a horse and we're halfway across the river, and you can't turn back now. You have to get this regime out of power. We must have regime change or it will get worse. As weak as the regime will be, it will get worse. Blackmailing, killing, or fleeing of all religious minorities inside of Iran, whether they be Christians or Jews, Baha'is, Sunni Muslims, and others, all will be in grave danger, particularly any converts from Islam or those who have become non-adherents. They will be attacked by this regime. They will be killed. They will have to flee. It will have impact in Europe. It will have impact in the United States. We have seen this play before. This will happen. If they stay in power, this regime that's there now, the martyr complex, as I mentioned, of the regime, will declare victory and be emboldened, recruiting jihadists and terrorists from around the world. That's what's going to happen. They will believe they are closer than ever to the return of the Messiah, Imam Mahdi, and must aggressively attack their enemies at home and abroad to remove them. This will be an extremely, extremely dangerous situation, and it does not need to be that way. The regime must be removed. We can do more, the United States and the West, to facilitate this. We can bring opposition groups together. We can support groups like the National Council for Resistance in Iran. We can urge the coming together of groups like the Kurds and the NCRI. We can arm and train these groups. We can work with them in the ways moving on forward. We can share intelligence with these groups and work with them closer to bring this regime and move it out of power. We can establish and maintain no-fly zones in key areas, like, say, where the Kurds are located, and be able to allow them to build up resistance and efforts and safe zones within that nation so that things can move on forward towards Tehran, that we can overturn the regime. We need to continue to have a muscular position towards Iran, a muscular military position, I believe, a muscular diplomatic position where we push and bring together these groups that are opposed to the regime, groups that can force change on the ground, groups that have boots on the ground, like what the MEK has. We have to work with these to see this on through and to seize this moment that has been pushed for and sought after and desired for 50 years. And we're so close to getting it done. We can't quit now. We've got to score. We've got to get this done. Otherwise, the situation will be far worse. Thank you for being in this fight so long. God bless you.
Folks, don't take my word for it. I'm going to show you a film to show you the deep fear that this regime has of the MEK and the NCRI. Don't be fooled or lulled into belief that somehow or other, because the American people are only familiar with a discarded monarch who wants to restore the monarchy because he's able to buy so much media. Maryam Rajavi and her team have spent far more time with boots on the ground, and maybe stilettos on the ground, but boots on the ground. Just watch this video for me.
Even the regime admits its concern. Their own words confirm the resistance unit's impact.
یک مثلثی در این قضایا فعال بوده است. پادویش هم مربوط به سازمان منافقین بود. از ماه‌ها قبل اینا آماده بودن.
شما نمیتونید از یک جریان علیه انقلاب و عناد با نیروهای انقلاب یاد بکنید و جای پای جریان نفاق رو در اونجا نبینید.
در رأسش گروهک منافقین که بیشترین نقش رو در سازماندهی این حوادث او کار انجام میداد.
The regime strikes back with brutality. Thousands arrested, hundreds disappeared, lives lost in silence.
Folks, Senator Gallego is going to join us, and he may join us before by the time we wrap up. You know, when Cory Booker mentioned the fact that he had seen Senator McCain, I just want to close this out by telling you a little story. I was introduced to Senator McCain by my boss, Senator Kennedy, and Senator McCain and I became good friends. And during the Obama administration, I'd be sitting in my office and my secretary or assistant would say, "Mark, John McCain's on the phone." And I'd say, "Oh my God, what does he want?" And he'd get on the phone. He'd say, "Mark, this is John McCain." I said, "Yes, Senator." He said, "What the hell are you Democrats doing today to ruin this country?" He was talking about foreign policy in Syria. They were caving in Syria. He said, we can't cave. We've got to support the Syrian people. He understood then that it wasn't so much boots on the ground, but angels in the air. And I'm not talking about bombs. I'm talking about airdrops. I'm talking about a new Iran Freedom Act that this Senate and the Congress needs to adopt. I'm not talking about a repeat of Iraq. I just hope that one day, when the American people realize that what they're sacrificing for at the pump, and they have no good reason to understand why their price of gasoline has gone up, other than the fact that there's a war involving the Straits of Hormuz. I have to say to them, I wish I could say to them, you may be paying an inflated price for gas, but I know how much you would like to see the Iranian people free. And if you knew that what is going on in Iran has less to do with the price of gas and oil, but more to do with the sacrifices of people who you are not being asked to do anything more than to help give them the support they need. President Zelensky of Ukraine told President Biden, I don't need a plane, I need weapons. And what the NCRI and the MEK need is all the types of support we ordinarily would provide. Think about it, to people who are going to wind up taking over a country who want to be our best friends in the Middle East. Make no mistake about it, we're not wanting to support the restoration of freedom and dignity to people who want to turn the clock back. They want to enjoy the same life that we Americans do. When Maryam Rajavi introduced her transitional framework to establish a provisional government, there was silence in Washington. Who was this person? How dare her stand up and suggest that she could create a government? Well, by golly, her transitional framework has been endorsed around the world by Canadians, by Europeans, by Africans, by Arabs, by Japanese. You need to see the people, the leaders who attend her meetings. If she could come here, she would stand before you today and she would say to you, give me the opportunity, American people, to speak to you directly. Transferring sovereignty to the Iranian people is not some elusive view that the baby Shah says that he's going to do. She's committed to a 6-month period of governance based on the 10-point platform and organizing democratic, free, and fair elections. I want to close this session out by saying that, and perhaps being a little bit forward, here are the policy recommendations I hope the congressional staff here will turn into an Iran Freedom Act. Treat the Iranian people as a strategic ally. Endorse their desire to overthrow the regime. That's easy, right? Condemn the execution of political prisoners in Iran. Well, that's easy. All we have to do is say that, right? That's easy. Acknowledge the role of the MEK inside Iran and the NCRI as parliament in exile as the force, the force for change and transition to democracy. That may be a tad harder, but we can make it happen if our voices are heard inside the Beltway, and Cory Booker is able to convince his colleagues that Maryam Rajavi has earned the right to be recognized in the United States as a person who could credibly lead a government in exile. And this is also something that must be done in the Iran Freedom Act. Hold the Iranian regime officials accountable for the crimes against humanity, for killing their own people, for waging global terror and developing weapons of mass destruction and persisting in trying to lie their way through a nuclear program that ultimately would become a nuclear bomb program. I lost my mother and my brother to their terror. I lost my nephew to their terror. I have no illusions about who we're dealing with, but I also understand the American people don't want an endless war. We can give the American people what they want, an end to this war with a baton handoff to the Iranian people, but we got to make it a baton that actually is a club. Think about the fact that these people, tens of thousands, went into the streets in unorganized protests and were shot in the streets by the Gestapo known as the Basij, and they had no weapons at all to defend themselves. We can provide them that. We can provide them the support they need. We can provide them the diplomatic and intelligence and communications support to break the repressive control that this regime has on the internet. If the internet were forced open, if Elon Musk's Starlink was in the hands of every Iranian, you would hear their voices far more loudly. I want to thank the National Council and Maryam Rajavi and all of you who've traveled near and far to be with us today. I want to thank the senators who joined us today. I want to thank Sam and Roy and Ambassador Sands. I want to thank the organizers, and most importantly, I want to thank the Iranian people, and I want to pay homage to those behind me, the young people who've sacrificed their lives. Defeating this regime, just think, the worst thing that could happen is that the United States government negotiates some grand bargain that leaves this regime in place, and that the Iranian people have sacrificed their lives for nothing. That's a fool's errand. They deserve better. The politics, the domestic political equation at home, whether you're Democrat or Republican, compels us to try to convince this administration and the Congress the Iranian people have deserved the right at this point to have your recognition of a provisional government, your communications and intelligence support, perhaps your weapons on the ground, no boots, but weapons, because one day, in the not too distant future, all of us are going to be in Iran, and we're going to have the best damn Persian meal you could ever hope in your lives. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. And I'm sorry that Senator Gallego was not able to join us. Let's tell him when you see him in the hallways, if he makes it, how much he was missed. Thank you.